Additional Hunter Biden podcast fallout, new trade deals with Japan, the European Union, and others, and the mystery of the missing California wildfire relief funds. All of that and more today on 10-Minute Drill.
Everybody get up, get up.
The story of America is the story of an adventure.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
We are a nation under God, and I believe God intended for us to be free.
We begin today with huge momentum on two very critical trade and tariff deals. First, the European Union, which has been a sticking point because of both the trade relationship, but also the non-trade barriers. We've talked about the digital services tax, where the European Union is attempting to extract penalties from US tech companies to be able to sell and operate in their markets. The other major progress is with Japan. Japan is one of the largest, most important markets that we've made progress with up to date. And the deal in discussion right now deals with automobiles, deals with agricultural goods, rice. It's a huge deal. And to my friends in Japan, yoroshiku onegai shimasu. On Tuesday, we talked about Hunter Biden's explosive 3-hour podcast interview where he unloaded on every Democrat operative and consultant under the sun and showed that the Biden family still has major axes to grind over how he was cast aside in the 2024 Democrat primary. An additional part of that interview was on the subject of immigration.
All these Democrats say, you have to talk about and realize that people are really upset about illegal immigration. You. How do you think your hotel room gets cleaned? How do you think you got food on your table? Who do you think washes your dishes? Who do you think does your garden?
As Democrats have attempted to frame their immigration messaging, Hunter Biden, a rich Nepo baby who's never worked a day in his life, complaining about who's going to clean his hotel rooms and make his food is not necessarily a helpful face. And you know who agrees with that point? The Pod Save America bros, former Obama aides, who Hunter took particular exception with in that podcast interview.
Hunter Biden, throughout Joe Biden's presidency, was a terrible liability for him. And put the addiction aside, it is because he was on Burisma, because he became an artist, because he was part of a kind of like sleazy Washington that, as Tommy said, people hated. You were a liability. You should be ashamed.
We've previously talked about Mahmoud Khalil, the non-American Columbia University former student who has led some of the anti-Israel, pro-Hamas protests at Columbia University and other places. He was detained, set for deportation. He recently returned to Capitol Hill to promote a $20 million lawsuit he is filing against the United States government. That lawsuit is meant to send a message to our government. He wants to hold the federal government accountable. He's meeting with representatives like pro-Hamas anti-Israel Rep. Summer Lee from Pennsylvania. He also is doing a series of interviews where he's talking about things like Hamas. In this interview, he refuses to condemn Hamas and the atrocities of October 7th.
I condemn the killing of all civilians, full stop. But what I don't want to get into is no, I am very clear with condemning all civilians. I'm very straight in my position in that part. But it's disingenuous to ask about condemning Hamas while Palestinians are the ones being starved now by Israel.
In another clip, he talked about specifically concerns that Jewish students had for their own safety, where he dismisses those concerns and says they don't feel unsafe, they just feel uncomfortable. Here's that clip.
We need to distinguish between being uncomfortable and between being unsafe. So there should be a distinction between these two. I can understand how these protests may make someone uncomfortable hearing that your country or a country that you support is committing a genocide.
This is egregious because the Democrat Party has always talked about believing the victims, believing people's shared experiences, and these Jewish students in universities were forced into hiding in rooms in their universities to get away from these masked protesters calling for the eradication of Jewish people and calling for, globalizing the Intifada, which again is violence against Jewish people. So of course they had genuine fear for their safety. But this is also starting And continuing, a very important conversation about our legal immigration system. This person was here on a student visa to learn in our schools and hopefully provide benefits to the American, institution and to America as a whole. And instead, he's attacking our American government. He's promoting terrorism, making American citizens feel unsafe, and we allowed that to happen. So I believe we will continue to hear more and more about the need for reforms to our student visa system. We talked yesterday in our special episode about President Trump and Senate Republicans' incredible work beginning confirmation process for very important judges. The Senate recently confirmed the 100th President Trump nominee and have also recently passed the big beautiful bill, crypto legislation, and things like that. There's a lot of discussion about working through August recess, working through weekends to try and get more and more things through. While they discuss that and the importance of getting as much work done as they can, one point I wanted to make as a former Senate staffer is the importance of members getting home to their districts to sell the benefits of what they've accomplished. The big beautiful bill has so many wins for the American people, but members need to get home to their own media markets and to their constituents to talk about how valuable this is. And so hopefully as they work through cutting back on that home work period, some people call it recess, but really members are not going on vacation. They're working in their home or district offices on the same issues. Hopefully they have time to get home and begin selling this important agenda to their constituents. Because as we've talked about here, without that effort, Democrats and the media will make, these important reforms to Medicaid, the important parts of the big beautiful bill, into a weapon to use against us. And so they're going to try and balance that. Speaker Johnson and Leader Thune are going to try and balance the need to have members here to vote and continue processing the agenda and nominees, but also getting them home where they can make the important case for these victories to the American people. We've talked a lot here about the California wildfires, the mismanagement that allowed these wildfires to spread and have the damage they had, the mismanagement that had empty wells where fire hydrants could not get water to put out the fires. Another component that we want to talk about today is the relief money. So $100 million was raised through concerts, through major events, things like that. FireAid organized concerts with U2, Billie Eilish, Lady Gaga, Olivia Rodrigo, Stevie Wonder, Katy Perry, the Red Hot Chili Peppers. They raised funds through the concerts, through merchandise, through donations from all over the world, $100 million. But victims of these wildfires have been saying, where is that money? Is it going to come to any of us? A few investigative journalists dug into this. Thanks to Leanne Sue Pasco, an investigative journalist for Circling the News, we now know that FireAid funds have not gone directly to residents, but instead to nonprofits selected by a charity based on the other side of the country. Turns out these funds are not going directly to victims, but going through an organization called the Annenberg Foundation. The Annenberg Foundation is deciding who to give these grants to based on nonprofit and non-government organizations that have relationships with the Annenberg Foundation. We looked in to some of those non-government organizations that have gotten relief money that was meant for victims of these wildfires. Those groups include some of the frontline support like churches, Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCAs, but also politically affiliated groups like the NAACP, the California Conservation Corps, which trains young climate activists. $7 million went to, quote, relief groups, unquote, which include the California Native Vote Project, a group that purports to stand with our undocumented relatives, the Latino Community Foundation, a partner in redistributing power within the Latino community, funding protests and the legal fight against deportations. My Tribe Rise, an organization that advocates for equity, justice, and power, educating on things like the origins of Juneteenth and other racial issues. A group called Alliance for a Better Community, advancing social, economic, and racial equity and justice for the Latina community and the Los Angeles region through power building and policy advocacy. $3 million in grants to musicians and artists, the Music Industry Mental Health Fund, and then Legal Aid. Now, the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles provides legal aid for a number of things, including support in deportation defense, people that are trying to avoid immigration cases, deportation, and things like that. So if you gave money to Fire LA, to this wildfire relief fund, you might have thought it was going to individuals who need help, who are some of the tens of thousands who lost their homes. It's not. A lot of it is ending up in political groups who are out trying to get Democrat voters or push Democrat priorities through this range of incredibly political nonprofits and non-governmental organizations. In summary, we always want to follow the money. So often, things that are disguised as well-intentioned, good objectives are used to hijack money for so many other things. That is what DOGE has spent the last 7 months revealing throughout our government. So much money meant for educating kids is actually going to teachers' unions. So many things for foreign aid through USAID is actually going to insane things like transing kids. Turns out, relief for wildfire victims, very similar, gets picked apart through these left-wing nonprofit groups. So we'll continue to follow that story. Yesterday, the Senate Judiciary Committee held a very important hearing on DEI throughout corporate America and the Trump administration, particularly Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon of the Civil Rights Division's efforts to get this illegal discriminatory behavior out of companies.
It's wrong to use race to harm somebody.
Yes, sir.
It's wrong to harm somebody because of their race.
It's illegal and un-American.
Yeah, it's okay to harm them legally and appropriately because they're an a-hole, but not because of their race.
This is an important hearing after President Trump has made this a priority of his administration, and particularly this Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, and we have already seen major progress from companies like Target, Tractor Supply, Ford, and others. Meanwhile, other companies continue these discriminatory practices either out in the open or behind the scenes. Companies like Microsoft, Chubb, Dish, and others continuing to discriminate to push divisive DEI practices. We've talked a lot here about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and polling again highlighting the fact that while people think diversity itself is a good thing, they oppose it strongly when it is forced through things like racial quotas and preferences, which is what so many of these programs in companies continue to do. So we'll track this closely. Kudos to Harmeet Dillon and everybody shining a light on this issue.
With these efforts underway, Senators, the goal is clear. Either DEI will end on its own, or we will kill it.
That is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us on 10-Minute Drill. We appreciate you. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment. Thank you for being with us. As always, have a great day.